Well, I wonder what Facebook thinks. Before we answer that question, I don't know whether you noticed in that video that began that the BBC so brilliantly produced for us, two words that aren't in my vocabulary. The Pope said that journalists are in danger of falling into coprophilia and behaving like coprophagics. I had to look it up. I don't know whether you know what it means, but the Guardian told me coprophilia is the abnormal interest in shit, and coprophagics are people who eat shit. So the Pope obviously has very strong views about what's going on in journalism. Some really interesting comments about the power of Google and of Facebook, and what a better segue for us into our next speaker. Campbell Brown, a veteran journalist. I knew her from NBC and CNN, has had a really illustrious career as a broadcaster, as an editor. Campbell now wears a new hat as head of partnerships, news partnerships for Facebook, a position created in January of this year. So Campbell is going to come up and give us her perspective on Facebook and journalism and journalists. Campbell? Thank you.
Okay, hi everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks to the Gen Summit for having me. It's really great to be here with you all this afternoon. I was going to try not to use my glasses. I thought the font was big enough, but I think I failed. It's especially nice to be following a talk called Editors versus Algorithms, and I just want to be clear, it was the algorithm that sent me here today. It's how we make all of our decisions at Facebook. As Jeff said, my name is Campbell Brown. I am the head of Global News Partnerships at Facebook. I lead what we call the Facebook Journalism Project. And let me see if I can work this. I had never used PowerPoint in my life before I took this job. And what I've discovered in Silicon Valley is no one has a conversation without a deck. So it's mandatory. We'll start there. So I moved to the dark side, or left the dark side, depending on where your head is these days, and came to Facebook after 20 years in journalism. I was at NBC News and then at CNN. Moving to a tech company was a very big adjustment for me, and I realized, I think one of the most important things that I needed to do in this role at the very beginning was understand newsfeed. It is probably the #1 question I get in this job. The #1 question that I get since I've started is about newsfeed, people asking me to explain the mystery of the algorithm, how it works, and most importantly, I think in the minds of my friends in the publishing world, how do I get more visibility for my stories in newsfeed? So I think coming off of this last discussion, I thought it might be a good place to start. And the truth is unfortunately not going to be terribly satisfying, but it is the truth. There is no secret sauce. When it comes to newsfeed, we basically have two sets of standards that we look at. The first are our newsfeed values, and these are the principles that we use to design and make improvements to newsfeed. We put friends and family first. Those go at the very top of your newsfeed, and from there on, we look at posts that do two things, that inform and that entertain. People expect their feed to be meaningful, they expect it to be accurate, they expect it to be interesting, but they also look to it as a source of entertainment. We don't pick which issues the world should read about. We are not the arbiters of truth. We rank with the intention of fostering connection. We want to show people things that they tell us they want to see, things that are authentic, things that are honest, and things that are real. The second set of values that guides these decisions are the community standards, and these are our content guidelines. The rules around violence, around hate speech, around nudity, and so on. Anything that violates our community standards doesn't stay up. We aim to remove any credible threat of violence, and we respect local laws. And where we need to improve, and obviously there are always areas where we need to improve, we are in dialogue with experts and local organizations on everything from child safety to terrorism to human rights. But newsfeed overall has changed recently. And by recently, I do mean over the last couple of years. There is a change in what a lot of people have wanted to see and in what they wanted to share, and that change has meant much more news and information. The community just started sharing more news. When I first started using Facebook, it didn't seem to me like there was even that much news on Facebook. It was primarily a place where I saw pictures of my nieces and nephews and said happy birthday to my friends from high school. Today, it's very different. It is a place where people go to share news. And even though Facebook is not a news organization, obviously, it is part of the news ecosystem. It is a big part, it is a critical part of the news ecosystem. And that means that we have a responsibility to work with that ecosystem and to try to make it better for everybody. Mark Zuckerberg referenced this in his recent open letter to the Facebook community, and he wrote about how our mission as a company is evolving and how we have to develop the social infrastructure to give people the power to build a global community that works for all of us. Mark wrote that it's not enough to just connect the world, as we've talked about, but we have to ask, are we building informed communities? Ones that expose us to new ideas, that build common understanding. Are we building civically engaged communities? And if we're not, what do we do to make it better? This is part of our mission now. So that line of thinking of greater concern for the effect that we have on the world is what drew me to Facebook. And that's what's behind the Facebook Journalism Project. We've been thinking about news-related issues for a long time, but this is us trying to put some structure around that thinking, coordinating our efforts with the news industry, hopefully to the benefit of everyone. These issues are obviously very complex, and there is not one reason that things are the way they are, and there won't be one solution that will ensure a thriving news industry going forward. But I know, and everyone at Facebook knows, just how critical journalism is. As Mark said, creating an informed community is part of our mission. Journalism is key to that. It's also key to a functioning democracy. I think we all know that. We can't do everything, but we can do a lot of things. And here's what we're focused on right now. So the Facebook Journalism Project is based on 3 pillars. The first one is closer collaboration on product development. Facebook is a technology company, obviously. We program things, and for a long time, we would develop products, launch them out into the world, listen to feedback, update the products, or iterate, as they say in Silicon Valley, and that was that. But what we recognized is that we needed our engineers to understand much better the needs of publishers much earlier on in the process. So we have brought them in much earlier in the process. This sometimes means it takes longer, because we're trying to get input and feedback from a lot of people at the very beginning. But I think it also means that we're going to end up with better products that publishers want and that they need and that actually really work for them. We have launched specific work streams on important issues around data sharing, video monetization, news credibility. These are small working groups made up of Facebook engineers along with publishers who are working together at the very outset of product development to try to build things that work both for the market and the industry. We are working with a broad range of publishers on video monetization tests across the board right now. We also want to try to find ways to boost and improve credibility, both for the platforms and for publishers. Brands, as you all know, are incredibly important to journalism. So we're working with partners to try to figure out how we can do more to raise brand awareness on the platform. I spent the early part of my career as a local news reporter bouncing around the United States. In the US, and I'm sure it's very true of regional publishers in Europe and elsewhere, there are a lot of smaller publishers who do not get the attention they deserve or that they need. Local papers do not have access to the kind of developer resources that major publications do. So we have recently hired a team to focus on local news, and this is an area where I really do think we can help. We're just getting started. There's a lot to do, but I think we can make some progress here. For most publishers right now, monetization is the top priority. We want to support that, whether you are building a subscription business, selling ads, or exploring other ways to make money. We are working on more tools to drive calls to action. For example, when you click on a story in Instant Articles, some users will get a prompt to sign up for an email newsletter or an offer of a free subscription, which hopefully can help build those relationships and in turn drive subscriptions. We've also enabled branded content on Facebook and Instant Articles, as it is increasingly becoming a very important source of revenue for a lot of publishers. The second pillar, am I on the second pillar? Let's try that again. There we go. The second pillar is about building better tools for journalists. Stories obviously are the heart of journalism, and we want to help journalists tell better stories by working with them to build better tools for news gathering and reporting. We launched journalism training courses in 9 languages, a certificate program we worked on with the Poynter Institute for Media, and it's worth checking out. It's really interesting. It's an e-learning course designed to help people learn better ways to discover content, create stories, and ultimately build their audience. We have increased our commitment to First Draft, the partner network, to help verify eyewitness reporting around the world. I know a lot of you are familiar with First Draft. And hopefully this will help a lot with the very important but difficult task of fact-checking. I bet there are a lot of CrowdTangle fans here today. Oh, I have another place to look, thank you. It's a great company, and we have a bunch of folks with us from CrowdTangle. It has recently joined the Facebook family. It has some powerful tools that I think can help publishers understand overall trends, analyze what content works and what content doesn't. And as part of FJP, it is free to publishers. CrowdTangle also just added video view metrics to Facebook and Instagram, so you have another way to track emerging trends, determine best practices, and figure out what videos work on the mobile platform and which to take off. And for those who want to learn more about CrowdTangle, the master himself, CrowdTangle CEO, Brandon Silverman, is holding a master class. I think it's happening right after this session, so it's definitely worth meeting Brandon and learning more. Another thing we're doing is hosting full-day FJP, Facebook Journalism Project, news days. We've been doing this around the world. And this is just a way to share best practices, and we're trying to do it at scale. It's a big part of building community, and that's partly building a community of journalists. In this industry, often we work in isolation. And I do think it's important that we get together, as you are here today, sharing ideas, and our best answers become best practices. We started this with a booth at UNESCO, their World Press Freedom Day in Jakarta, helping train journalists there on Facebook. And since then, we have been all over the United States, from Atlanta to Seattle. Globally, we've done Latin America, the Philippines, and just recently, just over the Alps in Milan. Our goal is to be in every region of the world by the end of this year. We're also hosting a number of hackathons, and for those of you who aren't familiar with hackathons, it is a long-standing tradition at Facebook where engineers or anyone the company within the company who has a great idea takes time to work on something in a very concentrated way, sometimes overnight, trying to prototype that idea. And in this case, we brought together engineers from the publishing world with our guys to do a very intensive effort around a couple of ideas. We've just held 2 in Europe, 1 in Hamburg and 1 in Paris. And it's been a chance for product strategy, engineering teams from all over Europe to come together with the local tech community and a group of our Facebook engineers to hopefully ship ideas. We're really excited about this, to see what they've come up with and where that collaboration takes us. We are also starting a new effort, which you'll learn a little bit more about today. We're just releasing this. One of the most challenging and difficult conversations I continue to have when I meet with people from the Facebook Journalism Project in this role and around the world has been what a lot of my women friends, women journalists, are experiencing. Maria's here. I know you heard from her earlier. And she and I have talked about this a lot, the harassment, the trolling, the threats, the impersonation, and so on. Facebook cracks down on these when they appear on the platform. We have to do the same for journalists, especially women journalists. We know what's happening right now, so that they can focus on sharing their stories, connecting with sources and their audiences. We are expanding our Facebook journalist site. We're adding a new section dedicated to the issue of journalist safety on Facebook. We worked with the European Journalist Center, the Connect Safely, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and the Foley Foundation on this to create a resource, Facebook Safety for Journalists. This guide is not the answer by any means to all of the challenges facing us, but I do think it will help some journalists learn how to protect their information, how to set up two-factor authentication and use encrypted messaging, how to moderate content, how to report things like abusive content, impersonation, or hacked accounts. And along with that, there are a lot of instructional videos on this type of material. It's available, or will be available, in multiple languages: Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Indonesian, and Spanish. And there is a lot more I think we can do in this area together. We're going to continue working on these efforts, and hopefully we'll have more to share on this in the coming months. The third pillar. Finally, the third pillar, we're looking at ways to support our community with new training and new tools for people. We want to make sure that the news and information that people see on Facebook is meaningful, authentic, and informative. So let me be very, very clear about something. Solving the problem of fake news, or false news on our platform is very, very important to us. We don't want it there. People don't want it there. And so we are doing everything we can to stop it, and to stop things like it, from clickbait to misinformation to sensationalism to spam and so on. Most of the time, what we have found is that people who are posting false news stories are financially motivated. They've learned that they can write something that looks like a headline that's designed to get you to click. Maybe it flatters your biases, maybe it scares you, whatever. They can send you to then a spammy page filled with ads, and they can make money from the clicks. That's primarily what it's about. So we're working on ways to disrupt their financial incentives for doing that. We've built a system that identifies phrases commonly used in clickbaity headlines, and we have categorized headlines as clickbait by weighing a couple of key points. Does it withhold information? Does it mislead? These stories are now being downranked in newsfeed, and there have been some pretty aggressive changes made on that front recently. There's still a lot more to do on the tech side, but if we really want to end false news on Facebook or any other platform, then we also have to do the really hard work of education, and that means improving news literacy globally. We have started working on this. Back in March, we brought together a group, journalists, educators, academics, nonprofit world, came for a session at the Cronkite School of Journalism in Arizona, at Arizona State, where we began sort of outlining plans for how to approach this, the news literacy issues. In April, we launched the News Integrity Initiative as one of the founding funders with CUNY, the Graduate School of Journalism. This is a collaboration between journalists and tech companies, focused on helping people try to be informed and make informed judgments about what they're reading and what they share online. I mean, as a mother, I think about this a lot. My kids are young. In all likelihood, they are never going to open a textbook, a physical textbook, in their entire lives. Most of the information they get during their education is going to come from online sources. And yet they're not being taught skills right now to be discerning about the news and information they read. So we have a responsibility to give them the tools to tell the difference between real news and false news, to tell the difference between a fact-based story and an opinion piece. This was not an issue for all of us when we were growing up. There were only a few news sources. News literacy was not a skill, I think, that we needed. Now, basically, you know this, anybody can call themselves a publisher. Anybody. There are no barriers to entry. And that's great news for having more voices in the public square, but it's very important that we equip people with the tools they need to tell the difference between a quality source of news and some fly-by-night operation. As we work on these curriculums, which we're excited about, we also have launched a false news PSA, a tool that really just helps users identify false news. We have improved our false news reporting tool to make it easier to let our content moderators know that something shouldn't be on Facebook. So with that, we live in a world that is defined by information. As we look ahead, as more and more people sign on to the internet for the first time, I think journalism, real, authentic, honest journalism will be in more demand than ever and more necessary than ever. I'm going to do everything I can with the Facebook Journalism Project to work with the industry, my industry, where I've spent most of my professional life, to secure journalism's future as we move from desktop to mobile and beyond. We are just getting started. But do please follow us at the Facebook Journalism page and join the news, and media, and publishing group to keep up with all the work we're doing. I should say our efforts will only work if this is truly a collaborative push, something that we're trying to do together, where we're helping build a future where quality journalism can not only survive but can really thrive. I want to get there. I don't think there's anything right now that's more important. So with that, I want to thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate your kindness today, and I think we have a few minutes to take questions, maybe? Yes, hopefully.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So, yeah, we do have a few minutes. If you would like to ask a question, as usual, please put your hand up. We'll get a microphone to you, and please identify yourself. We'll start over here, please.
Christophe Leclerc from the Policy Media. You're active. I think the elephant in the room is that Google is doing a lot also. So perhaps you could help us understand what are the differences between your initiatives and the Google initiatives. If I understand well, Google D&I is a bit more on co-funding, and you are doing more on training. Is there the objective to also do co-funding?
So I don't see this as a competition in any way. My hope is that we can support each other's efforts, and in areas where they're not focused, that maybe we can pick up the slack. I think news literacy is a really good example of that, but I should say Google is part of the News Integrity Initiative with us. They've joined the board. So I feel like on these areas, we have so much overlap that we should be collaborating with Google in the same way that we want to be collaborating with publishers. So I want to learn from the things that Google has done successfully. The things that haven't been successful, I also want to learn from. And then I want to support the things that they are doing that make a lot of sense for publishers and for this work, especially around false news and news literacy. And I'm sure they'll do the same for us. I mean, our interests are all so aligned on these issues that I see this as really an opportunity for all of us to work together.
Campbell, when you look in your crystal ball, do you see Facebook and Google dominating the landscape 20 years from now?
I would not dare predict what media is going to look like in 20 years. I think all of us would be out of our minds if we tried to predict what media is going to look like in 20 years. I mean, just think about what's happened in the last 5 years. Most of my friends are reporters, having spent 20 years, my whole professional life as a reporter. This is something, the massive transformation that media, news in particular, is going through right now is so unsettling and unpredictable. And it's what we talk about all the time together. And I think the reason it's so unsettling is that we don't know what it's going to look like in 20 years. I don't think we know what it's going to look like in 5 years. But what I do know is that the platforms are part of the ecosystem. I mean, there's no denying that. And that means that we have a responsibility that we can't walk away from. We wouldn't want to walk away from. Our interests on this are aligned. You know, we can't have informed communities without journalism. We can't. Okay. So this is, to me, a joint effort. It has to be a joint effort to get to where we all like to be.
Let's go back to the floor over here, please.
Yes, I'm Carl Gustav Linden from the University of Helsinki, Finland. Thanks for a really interesting presentation. I wanted to inquire, how would you describe the news partnership, the best win-win situation from your point of view?
Sure. I think everyone's #1 priority right now is monetization. And I think what we can do, as I mentioned, you know, to support different ways that people are trying to find sustainable business models is where should be a big part of our focus right now. Part of the challenge, as you know, is there's no silver bullet. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to this. Some people are pursuing subscription models. Some people are interested in video monetization. For some people, it's branded content. So given that, I think it's going to take us a little while. It's a complex problem, but I do think journalism has to be in a healthy place. It's why I talked about local news. Local news in the US, and I've met with a lot of regional publishers, some from Austria and Germany recently. It's a real struggle. Is it a different place, I think, than some of the national publications that are starting to get real traction with their subscription businesses? And so we're spending a lot of time with local news organizations trying to think through better ways that Facebook can be supportive of local news outlets, because we are good at community. And I do think there's a role that we can play there that we haven't quite figured out yet. We hired someone on the product to lead a product team focused on that. So I would really like to see some progress there over the next year.
By the way, I should mention that this is being broadcast on Jen's Facebook channel, and it was earlier on Facebook 360, the new 360 all-immersive Facebook. We have a question at the back.
Hi, Jovi Wan from the Wall Street Journal. I just had a basic question about your algorithm. Are you scoring news organizations?
Are we scoring news organizations?
Yeah, I mean, do places like the Journal rank higher than Breitbart?
No.
Why not?
But because we have, you know what, it's funny you ask this. It's a very, I would assume that a lot of publishers would have the same point of view on this, that we should be deciding these are quality news organizations. We all know these are quality news organizations. These aren't, and we all know these aren't. So why aren't you scoring? When I have asked that question in a room full of publishers, it is a very divisive issue. Very divisive issue. People don't want Facebook to be in the position of deciding what's quality, what's not, what's fact, what's fiction, the arbiter of truth thing. This is something that a conversation that we have been having in one of our working groups around news credibility issues. And whether you can give signals in newsfeed, maybe. I mean, I think the way to think about it, rather than saying the Wall Street Journal should be ranked higher than somebody else, what we're doing, because publishers are not aligned on this, ask your friends. What we are doing is looking at ways where we could find signals in newsfeed that might show us what's quality. For example, if somebody spends 5 minutes reading a story versus someone spending 5 seconds on a story, it's far more likely that they're spending that time, the 5 minutes, on something more substantive than some clickbaity headline where they're spending a few seconds. So that longer time spent on a news article might get a higher ranking than shorter time spent. I mean, these are the kind of signals that I think can get at what you're talking about, and this is one of the things that the engineers in the news credibility group are looking at. But just in terms of coming up with a list, here are the good guys and the bad guys, is not something we want to do, and not something that a lot of publishers want us to do.
I've always heard that, when we've talked to Google, they've said that, they do rank our stuff higher because of who we are. Like, I don't know why Facebook can't do the same thing.
I can't speak for Google. I can only speak for Facebook.
All right,
suspect.
we could go on. I would love to go on, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of you would. But it is 4 o'clock, and we have run a very tight, efficient day, which makes Bertrand very happy. The good news is that coffee and snacks await downstairs. But before we go downstairs, let me just thank Campbell for coming all the way this way and for a really insightful speech.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.